Six Sigma is really just a process improvement methodology. It's basically a framework you use to solve problems. That's probably the simplest way to explain it. And its origins come from, manufacturing, where we were trying to make everything to the point of perfection. That's essentially the concept of Six Sigma. It starts in a way that most people start their businesses, with empathy. You start with what is the customer's problem, and then you go through the different iterative steps. And I think that framework aligns with a lot more entrepreneurs typically in the British system. One of the earliest questions we have is, how are you setting up your people to be successful? Because many people might not have that same initial entrepreneurial drive that you had. People who know how to fight good or who know how to fight well are really, really good at, having co-founders or having a team, because they're used to the idea that it's not somebody has to win or somebody has to lose. It's a more situation, are we moving forward as a unit? So now it's actually more important than ever that you have your own voice, because it's the only thing that will differentiate you. Like if you're in thought leadership or anything, you actually have to be sharing your own experiences. You can use AI to edit, to help you shape this narrative. But ultimately, the stories are yours. That's just what will make you unique.
Welcome back to the Hustle and Grind podcast, the show where we dig into why real entrepreneurs trade comfort for conviction. This isn't about vanity metrics or overnight success. It's about the stories behind building a reputation that actually matters. I'm your host, Andrew, keynote architect, platform builder, and fellow founder in the trenches. Today, I'm sitting down with Isioma Utomi, the founder of the Performance Upgrade Lab. Isioma is a productivity strategist and leadership consultant who helps entrepreneurs and new managers lead with clarity and confidence. With her background in leading Lean Six Sigma projects for Fortune 500 companies, she brings a unique blend of continuous improvement and emotional intelligence to the table. She's here to share how she helps business leaders transform how they think, decide, and deliver, especially in fast-growth, high-pressure environments. So, Isioma, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you being here. We've already had a good conversation. You've got a couple of things that we're going to talk about today, which I think are super important. So I'm incredibly honored to have you on the show.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Andrew.
Anytime. So I want to jump into something first. And it's something that in the corporate world, we know what this is, but in the entrepreneur space, we may not. And so I want to talk a little bit about Six Sigma. Because I think there's a transition here. So why don't you do this? Explain what it is, and then we'll transition it into entrepreneurship, because I think it's a really cool tool, and I think it's something we can use. Yeah.
Sure. For the newbies to Six Sigma, Six Sigma is really just a process improvement methodology. It's basically a framework you use to solve problems. That's probably the simplest way to explain it. And its origins come from, manufacturing, where we were trying to make everything to the point of perfection. That's essentially the concept of Six Sigma. We're trying to remove all the defects, make things better and better and better. And that ultimate perfection state is what we aim for in Six Sigma, essentially. And a lot of really, really big companies use it as their primary method of improvement, of making changes. And so that's really, really like where it came in. And it had a huge impact on my own career, because it influenced a lot of ways I see change and how change works in organizations.
Mm-hmm. And that the Six Sigma comes from a concept in engineering where, the safest mode of transportation is like a Six Sigma mode of transportation. That's an elevator. I think cars are like 3 Sigma or something like that. So it comes from, process improvement and getting as close as we can to that perfection. Have you used this with entrepreneurs, and how did that work out for you?
It's quite interesting, actually. So what I've learned over the years is that in the end, problem solving I look at it more of a toolbox versus like a very rigid system. And what a lot of entrepreneurs have responded well to, I think, over the years has been kind of that I can use this particular tool from this subset and this particular tool from that subset. Because I remember when I was explaining this very early on a couple of years ago to an entrepreneur, and they were just like, do I have to follow all these rules? I have to use like this particular statistical model to sort this out before I do this. And he just gave me this look, and I was just like, you know what, let's use some concept from design thinking to help you here. So yeah, a lot of entrepreneurs are more comfortable with design thinking. And I think that it has to do with just the fact that it starts in a way that most people start their businesses, with empathy. You start with what is the customer's problem, and then you go through like the different iterative steps. And I think that framework I think aligns with a lot more entrepreneurs typically than the British system. But what they find out later on oftentimes is by the time they're building larger businesses, as the businesses are growing, you kind of need businesses that have a little more process to them, that do have some kind of parameters to how things work. Maybe when you started, you could go like this, like wide loops in terms of how things go. But when you now have an efficient system that's running, you can't deal with as many variables as that. When you started your business, you don't want to deal with that many variables because you might now be dealing with thousands of customers versus like 2 or 3 who could be like, okay, the end came off of your item. Like, it's fine. You could just stick it back on. But like now it would be a huge crisis for your business. And so learning how to see what your business needs at any point in time, I think is a really important skill set for entrepreneurs to have and like acknowledge as they grow their businesses.
Because to me, Six Sigma takes the implementer role to a whole new level. Like if you're familiar with EOS and the book Traction, I talk a lot about it because I've seen it work really well, where you have the visionary deals with their thing over there. And then, but the Six Sigma is the implementer side of things where now I have this toolbox of ways that I can make things more efficient, especially like you're saying, as a company gets larger, your job title isn't yes anymore. All of the things, it's now we have to actually start getting these processes in place. And so that's why I wanted to bring it up, is because I think some entrepreneurs haven't really heard of what Six Sigma is, or they've heard of Six Sigma and they don't really understand how it might work into their world. They think it's very corporate and there's actually something different. So it's one of the reasons I love having a podcast is I can ask really cool questions and say, hey, I want to think about that. Let's hear what you have to say. So absolutely. So you're the CEO of Catalyst Experience Solutions. You have what's called the Performance Upgrade Lab. Let's hear about that a little bit. What is, because I love that name, Performance Upgrade Lab. That immediately makes me want to see, more about what you're doing, because as entrepreneurs and high-performing individuals, we want to get that edge. How did you found it? Let's start with that first. What was the origin story behind the Performance Upgrade Lab?
Sure. So the Performance Upgrade Lab and just my business as a whole kind of started in, like many businesses in the last 5 years or so in COVID. I had my original career I started out in engineering, hence the Six Sigma. I started out in engineering, in manufacturing. And over the years, I discovered that one of my favorite aspects of the role wasn't just running the projects with people, was also helping people get satisfaction from it in their roles. Because you realize that by running a project that improves systems, you suddenly realize that somebody's life was better because you did that. Somebody is now like, okay, yeah, I can deliver this on time versus like 2 weeks late, which was my life situation before you came in. And I love that. And that really what inspired kind of my transition from pure engineering to more leadership development. And so at this point, I'd been doing leadership development with another organization for a couple of years. And then it was at that point in time, mid-COVID, and I started thinking, okay, what are other ways that I can express this? What are other ways I can support people in this manner? How can I help them be more successful at work? And that is essentially how it came to be. We started out doing just little workshops about, how to rethink the way you do your work, how to kind of plan out growth. And the organization kind of grew from there.
Huh. So now I agree a lot with that. Sometimes just processes are wonderful. They're a great way to be able to do something, because now I have a process. I don't have to spend my brain power on doing that one thing. It's now just a process. I can, as leaders of organizations, we have a huge issue with control problems because this is our baby. We put a huge amount of effort and energy into building a company, and letting the reins go is often really difficult. Talk to me about how some of your clients have had success, or how you've been able to help your clients to make that transition.
It's actually really funny that you brought that particular kind of context up, because one of the big things we really do at the Performance Upgrade Lab is kind of look at how people think, act, and deliver results. And at the start of a business, for instance, the entrepreneur, like you said, they are a master of all things. They control whether it goes left or right and whether it's pink or blue. But as you develop in the organization, you find out that work becomes more and more specialized. And then you have people who are doing different things in different ways. And not everyone has the same mindsets that the great entrepreneur has at the top. And so a lot of times, a lot of entrepreneurs feel a great deal of frustration with that. And in the course of doing that, a lot of my work evolved into asking entrepreneurs the question when we have a first conversation. One of the earliest questions we have is, how are you setting up your people to be successful? because many people might not have that same initial entrepreneurial drive that you had. They might not come from that same similar background. For them, it's like, it's a job. I want to get a paycheck. But how do you create an environment that actually helps them develop that, to create that bias for action, to have that mindset that is more curious and like, this could be better. What can we do? Versus, this is how it's supposed to be. So it's that balance, that tension between the stable system that we want to create and giving that opportunity for innovation. And that's really what my work is about.
And do you find that transition easy for entrepreneurs, or is it difficult?
It depends on entrepreneur, but I would say that a lot of people, the letting go part is hard. That one is hard for everybody.
Kind of try to politely put that, but yeah, we all have control. That is what it is.
It is. But I think the great thing about entrepreneurs too, is that usually once they see, okay, this is an opportunity for me to have growth, this is an opportunity for me to move something forward, then they start thinking more openly about it. They're like, okay, so how can we start putting more systems in place? How can we start delegating more effectively? How can we start creating that environment where people aren't afraid to say, I'm not sure if that's the best idea, to you, the almighty entrepreneur. And so therefore, I think it's when you start doing that more and more, and especially if you've had practice for years. If people who started as solopreneurs might find it a little harder if they've been in their business for a while before they hire a team. But I found that people who have like co-founders who are used to having like disagreements early on might find that transition a little easier.
I once had a client of mine, and I was on site helping him out with a talk that he was doing. And so in the middle of the day, he told me this was going to happen. He's like, look, I'm going to have a meeting with my partners, and it's going to take a while. And I told him, great, I'm not going to sit around eating bonbons. I've got work to do. So you go do your thing. And it was a 3-hour meeting, and he got done with it. And he comes in looking all haggard, like he had just been through war, going, being in business is often like being married. Obviously, it was a contentious business meeting. And it was one of those situations where it is. I mean, being a founder, you're used to that give and take. If you're a solo founder, it's a little bit different than it is if you've got a partnership where you've got that give and take, and you have a respect with each other enough. And it was like they were fighting like brothers. It was funny to watch, but
but it's actually quite interesting you mentioned that too, because an analogy I heard from someone before was essentially that relating it to sort of like marriages, you have to know people who know how to fight good, or who know how to fight well, are really, really good at, having co-founders or having like, a team, because they're used to the idea that it's not a, somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. It's a more situation, are we moving forward as a unit? And people who have experience in that are also find that kind of transition easier.
Yeah, it's an iron sharpens iron situation. It's not fighting just to fight. It's you have a group of passionate people with diverging views. And, it took me a while to figure this out. It's not like they're fighting. It's, again, passionate people with diverging views who are trying to come to some consensus because they want to see everyone win in this. They want to see it move forward. And sometimes that gets a little bit spicy, Yeah. It's an interesting dynamic that I've seen in some of my clients as well. And it's fun to watch, especially when it's done properly and respectfully. I mean, this is not disrespectful kind of going out on a limb. It's no, I don't agree with you. Here's why. And that sort of a thing. I think it's an interesting, I don't know. I watch people. I like that sort of interesting kind of connection.
Yeah. And you realize that it's so much about communication.
Yeah. So now what specific things we were talking about tool sets with Six Sigma when we first started. And what are some of the tool sets that you use and you've seen work really well that anybody can implement? I like on this podcast to be able to give some sort of like here's an action item you can use. Is there something you see work really well that somebody can implement that gets them in the direction that shows kind of a little bit about what Performance Upgrade Lab does?
Sure. Well, I would say that, interestingly enough, one of the things that seems very simple, but a lot of people feel on very epically early on, is actually active listening. So when it comes to relating to team members, for instance, most people, when we have conversations, most of us just kind of talk over each other. We say something, the other person says something, and we go back and forth. But active listening actually requires like a structure. So a lot of people don't realize this. And so when they have team meetings and then they finish the team meetings, like, oh yeah, we had a discussion. What was the end result of the discussion? No idea. we didn't get anything done.
I feel both understood and judged at the same time because I've been in meetings like that.
But that's the thing. A lot of us don't really think of it as an actual skill set. We just think of it as like, we're listening. We heard them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, but when you're actually doing active listening, a big part of active listening is actually shutting up for a good part. And then actually hearing what the person is saying and then indicating that we hear them. So all those little sounds, you make, really? Those little comments that indicate that you are actually paying attention. It would shock you as to how it impacts the person that is listening. They recognize that you are actually paying attention to what they're saying. And then you also repeat what they've said back to them. You say, so somebody was giving you a whole, talk about, how, they're having issues with their customers. And then you, as the team leader, say, okay, so what you're saying is the customer wasn't satisfied with the product in the end. They returned it and they left a complaint. Is that what you said? Is that what you shared with me? And just that simple repetition, one, makes the person feel heard, and then ultimately make sure that you've basically done a summary in your head. And so you have a much better idea of what the issue is before you start, giving your own opinion, giving your own feedback. And so that is a very underestimated skill set as a team leader or anyone like leading an organization. Yeah,
exactly. And as part of my job, I used to have to teach active listening, and it's impressive the amount that it does. It's not just repeating back what they said. It's saying in your own words, here's how I received that communication. And you're right. It has a massive impact. And just that moment, a couple of seconds to just make sure that everyone's on the same page can really stop a lot of misunderstandings. And a lot of those, everyone knows what they're doing when not a single person knows what the hell you just talked about. Yep. Because I've seen those meetings.
And it's very common, especially for people who are first-time managers. So a lot of people I work with tend to be, first-time managers, first-time leaders as founders. And especially if you didn't have that corporate experience before, it might be kind of a shock when you do start leading a team for the first time. Yep. But yes, it's very, very important skill to learn.
Absolutely. So we're talking about skills, we're talking about things. And when you said, relaying everything off, it's not just going from your AI note taker, it's actually saying what's in your brain. Right? But we were talking earlier also about AI and how it's now changing things. And I think that AI is a huge buzzword right now. Everyone's thinking a lot of things. I think about half of them are right, if I'm being generous. But we were talking earlier about how you have helped your clients integrate AI into what they're doing. And you had some really good views. So AI, how do you think it's going to affect our workplace actually versus what everyone thinks is going to happen?
So I've seen people on both sides of the fence, people who think that AI is, going to cause the end of the world, and others who are completely apathetic and unconcerned, like it's not my business. Let the tech people deal with it. But the truth is, I look at it from the perspective of augmentation. How can AI enhance what we are already doing? How can it help us improve? Yes, there will certainly be jobs that are taking away, the things that are repetitive, just like with any new technology coming into the space. It will take out things that are repetitive, things that take time, and are very simple tasks. But what we can do in our organizations is really think about what are the jobs that we have to be done and how can we use AI to enhance those. So I often use the example of like the calculator. When it came out, people thought that, okay, there's going to be a whole bunch of people who do like accounting that are out of business. And then Excel came out, bookkeepers. So you're never going to have a job again because everybody can now use Excel. And yet somehow all these people have jobs. So what essentially happened is that they started leveraging the technology, the new technology that came out to enhance the work they're already doing. So now it's the staple. Like everybody knows how to use Excel now. But just that perspective, that looking at it from a point of curiosity, I think that's ultimately what organizations have to start doing and making a part of their culture if they want to be successful in this AI age.
It's a powerful tool with a lot of shock and awe value. And I think that's one of the reasons why people are like, oh, these people aren't going to be around in a while. Well, no, they are. It's just going to different role, like you said, yes, it puts some bookkeepers, the ones that would just go through and tally up things. Yes, they put them out of business, but then they move into something else.
Exactly. So I was doing work with we had a manager in one of the roles. And so a lot of his work involved like responding to his, direct reports. And there were certain, like, we realized that after we went through like his role, there were a lot of things that he did on repeat, essentially. And so, like, why don't you have like a template for this? And he was just like, oh, really? It's like, yes, have a template for it. And you have systems that can actually send it on autopilot, essentially based on standard things that happen. You get a report at this time every single week. We know it's going to happen. So why don't we like automate that particular aspect of the process? And so sometimes it just takes someone outside looking at your role and you'd be like, oh, right, I really don't have to be suffering over this. So,
Exactly.
yeah, you can focus on other things.
Yeah, and it can help. There's been sometimes I've been super tired going in a million directions and I'm looking at this email going, wow, I sound like a jerk. Put it through ChatGPT for a second going, here's what I really want to say. Can you help me out?
Yeah.
And I think for stuff like that, it makes a lot of sense. It helps us kind of tweak things. It's not going to be the end all and be all, but it is a very powerful tool.
And I'm sure you've discovered that even just, we've had these like talks about, like there's AI slush and like the web, there's just so much content being like pushed out by AI and such. So now it's actually more important than ever that you have your own voice because it's the only thing that will differentiate you. Like if you're in thought leadership or anything, you actually have to be sharing your own experiences. You can use AI to edit, to help you shape this narrative. But ultimately, the stories are yours. That's just what will make you unique. And I think that's what we have to remember. Those human skills are the ones that will actually keep us in jobs going forward.
Yeah, I use it for iteration. If it's like, give me like 10 ideas for this, and then I'll go through it and it'll get me 70% of the way there maybe. And then I'll just tweak from there and go on that point. But it's good for iteration, things like that. Hey, can you just reword? This is my voice. I have written this, but this just sounds off. Can you just tweak this a little bit? Is it going to take over the keynote, writing keynote? No, I don't think it will. It can't get the emotional depth right and the timing correct. But hey, it's a powerful tool. And I love using it. I love ChatGPT. It's great. I'm a big fan. Except for the current model. The new model they just released is a little weird. I like my older 4. Give me 4.
I've noticed I'm giving it a little time, but I've noticed a few things. So I'm hoping they figure it out. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, how can we get a hold of you? So we're going to put some links into the description as well, into the show notes so people can do it. But what's the best way to get a hold of you? Somebody wants to know more. LinkedIn? Okay.
Yes. So I'm on LinkedIn. I like to share, about leadership, about innovation. And so that really is the easiest way to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. And we will have a link in the description for you so that way you can do it. You also have your website and your YouTube as well. Folks, thank you so much, Isioma, for being on today. I really appreciate it. We've talked about a bunch of things, and I think things that are important to hear as far as entrepreneurs. And so, again, thank you so much for being on.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hustle and Grind podcast, where we unpack what it really takes to build something that matters. If today's conversation hit home, do me a favor. Share it with someone who's in the trenches too. And if you're building your own brand, platform, or message and want help turning that story into serious authority, head over to theauthorityforge.com to see how we can help. Until next time, keep showing up, keep shipping, and keep chasing the work that sets you on fire. I'm Andrew, and this was the Hustle and Grind podcast.